Hi guys, my name is Arnab and I'll be the moderator for the session today. Today we have with us Snehal Thakkar and she will be speaking on the best practices of product management in India. So Snehal essentially comes with a diverse experience in the field of product management, having worked with companies like Browserstack, Nykaa and Apple in the past. Generally, a lot of us have doubts about the roles and responsibilities of what a product manager does and how it varies across the various industries. So today Snehal will be sharing her view and perspective on these points and also share some ideas about the different stages of product development. So Snehal, over to you now.
Hi guys, good morning everyone. I'm Snehal. I currently head the app testing team at Browserstack. Browserstack is a B2B space product and it's in the growth stage right now. Before this, I also helped them with building their analytics and the right metrics that they need to track to even identify what growth opportunities are. Before this, I was heading the entire mobile division with Nykaa, where I built out their Android and iOS apps and took them to up to 1 million downloads and to a conversion rate of 3.5% with organic growth. And before that, I was with Apple in California, a part of the retail team where I was helping them build retail products. If you've ever been to an Apple store, India doesn't have any real Apple stores, but if you've been to one, there are 5 to 6 products that the Apple store employees use to work with people coming in. So we help them build those out. So that's my general background.
Nice. So Snehal, it's great to have you on the session today. And like you mentioned, so the broad agenda of the session would be Snehal will run us through a couple of slides that she's prepared for you guys. Post that, we will also be taking up the questions that you guys sent to us on the live chat. So essentially, the slides would run for about the first 20-25 minutes, and we will then be also running into a Q&A, which would be addressing each of the pointers that you guys have. So Snehal, over to you on the slides again.
All right, I'll just share my screen. All right, does everybody see my screen now with the product management slides?
Yes, we can see it, Snehal, yes.
All right, great. So I'll walk you guys through what product management I think is and what I have learned in my years of product management experience working with different types of B2B versus e-commerce versus a giant like Apple, and what their principles are. Essentially, the core of product management remains the same. I'm sure you all have seen this diagram multiple times, that it has to be the center of UX, tech, and business. So you need to know certain qualities about UX, tech, and business. But what are these things that you specifically need to know? Because if you're going to try to see, okay, you need to know something in UX, you really need to understand what are these UX principles that you need to know. You don't need to know the element levels of user experience. So let's go ahead with the principles that we feel have been important, and with people whom I've spoken to, even the VP of Dropbox, the VP of Twitter, when I have been there and I've met them, all of us agree that these are the common principles that everybody kind of looks in a product manager. You really need to understand the UX and the UI guidelines. By guidelines, I don't mean the specific internal elements, but like the structure. So if you see any product, if you take example of say Apple, if you see that the entire website has a clear structure, that structure is something that you need to understand. If you Google about what the UX, UI guidelines are, that's all you need to kind of care about. A good starting point could be Google material design guidelines, which are great, which is what a lot of people are adopting and innovating on top of it. The second most critical behavior that we need, or principle that we think is very, very important, is the experience working with the UX team, or to try to identify or to know what you have in hand. Generally, UX people are very creative in nature. So, you always have to make a balance of what is going to be the right balance between, where you have to stop them, that, you can't get more creative than this. This is enough. This is where we think it's going to solve the user problem, or this usability for now is good. So you're going to have a lot of discussions with the UX team where you all are not going to agree a lot of times. So I think that it's a very important skill to understand that these people are more creative, and you have to kind of always reason them out with things where it works and things where it doesn't work. The third one is obviously you need to be collecting usability feedback. So once you've shipped any UX principles out or shipped any UI elements out, you need to understand, you need to know if they've been successful or not. And a good way to do this is collect usability feedback from customers. There are multiple ways. You can do it qualitatively and you can do it quantitatively. You can Google about it and you'll find a lot of areas or a lot of ways. Personally, what I think has helped me a lot is to call the customers and keep a list of questions ready that you'd like to ask them. The second is a lot of these tracking tools help. The tracking tools just tell you what the hit rates are, how they are behaving, but the actual user behavior of why they are clicking versus why they are not, you'll know it through customer calls. And customer calls give you a lot more insights just other than just, the user elements. And the fourth but not the least, which is also quite hyped in India right now, is the analytics piece. But it's hyped for the right reasons. It's quite crucial for all of us to know the right sort of analytics to track. For tracking UX principles, a couple of good tools, basic tools, but really, really good. One is you can start off with Google Analytics. It gives you a very nice idea. Second is Inspectlet, which I really, really like if you're in the MVP stage, because it records videos and it also shows heat map of where the user is been most of your time. And the third is something like Mixpanel or Amplitude, which kind of tells you the entire funnel or the user behavior. So this is about the UX principles. The next is what in the business circle you need to really know. The very first thing that a product manager needs to know, even before anything else, is what is the business vision? What does the CEO of company want to really achieve? Do you believe in it? That's the very first thing that you need to understand. If you believe in it, only then there's going to be a product. Because a product manager essentially has to be very, very passionate. He's the one person who has to rally the entire team to build it. So it's very important for you to believe in the business vision completely. The second, obviously, is that whatever the CEO is believing in, you have to kind of study and do market research to see if there is value proposition in it. What is the value of what you're going to be building? Is it going to solve a real problem? Are people going to pay for it? Are we going to make money out of it? The third is you need to know what all other products are already out there and what you're trying to build. This is essentially to identify what has been the deal breaker for them and what's going to be a deal breaker for you. And the fourth but not the least is the market opportunity. How big is the market for what you're trying to solve? So these four are like essential for you to even know before building a product from the business standpoint. And this holds true even for the smallest of feature that you're trying to build. Is somebody else trying to build the feature? Is this feature really important? How is it going to, what value it's going to add? What are the others doing in this space? And how useful is this feature to the customers? Now comes the technology bit. Arnab did mention that a lot of folks do not have a technology background, but aspire to be product managers. And I would say we have, in our own team, we have a couple of product managers in Browserstack. Browserstack is a very technology savvy product company who come without any technology background. But what they do know is they understand the agile methodologies very well. They know how to, their learning curve is pretty steep, they can learn very quickly. So that's one thing that you really, really need to know if you don't have a strong technical background or you don't have any experience of working with development teams. Again, like UX teams, which are very creative people you have to fight with and you have to kind of reason them out on why we are building this. Development team also, it holds true. Developers are people who do not like to talk much. So you really, really have to convince them on what they have to build and why they have to build. Because a lot of insights generally, especially for technology products, comes from development team itself. The last but not the least is experience working with engineers. Engineers are very radical, reasoning and logical. So if you're able to convince them, if you're just able to give them a good logic or a reason around them, I think you'll be well in terms of doing this. I'll also share at the end of what are the exact qualities that we look for in product managers at Browserstack, what we were looking for at Apple, at Nykaa, and to a lot of other people in Twitter and Dropbox that I've spoken to. That will clarify or make you less scarier about, oh, do I need to know every technology principle or not? All right, so that was about what is product management. Now, for a product that you want to build, what are the multiple stages that you have to go through? A lot of them kind of put this life cycle in terms of, okay, initially you need to have the idea, then you need to conceptualize it, then you need to kind of design it, and then you need to implement it and execute it. But I don't think it's that simple when you are working in any company. The real ways in which I would like to identify, or most of the people in our stream at a senior level identify it, is in terms of MVP, which is a minimum viable product. This is more like a proof of concept as to what idea you are thinking of, whatever research you've done, is it really validated by people using this product? The next phase is growth. Once your idea has been validated and proven, how do you grow it? How do you start making money out of it? And the third one is maturity. Once you're already at a growth stage, how do you keep continuously growing and finding new and new opportunities to kind of stay at where you are? This is what we've done at Apple. So the MVP stage I am currently doing with Browserstack. I'm building an app testing product for them. The growth stage, I've seen it in Nykaa and in Browserstack. And maturity is what I've seen in Apple. So I'll share my experiences, which I've tried to put down in a little generic fashion so that everybody from different domains also kind of gets a clear understanding. So what involves in building MVP? For me, it's very, very simple. If you can do these things in this systematic way, I don't think you can fail. You first need to identify the user problem. You need to define it. For defining, there are multiple questions within it. What is it? Is it a real problem that the user is facing? A user is never going to say a problem straight away. You have to derive what the problem is. He's going to bring up things which are not so critical, but you have to derive from the entire conversation you've had with him or the behaviors you've seen. Once you know what your user problem is and you've locked it down, you need to create distinct personas of who all are facing these problems, and you need to segment them into different customers. Like, say, for example, in Browserstack, we are a cross-browser testing tool. So for us, our personas are developers, our personas are QAs, and our personas are full-stack developers, who are the ones who kind of develop themselves, test themselves, and ship themselves. Even among these personas, we have multiple categorizations. Like, a developer could be from a startup versus from a SME versus from an enterprise. So we pick one persona after doing market study and market opportunity and knowing which persona we want to target in MVP. In MVP, you generally try to target the persona that's going to have the highest impact and needs very little to be done. The persona that kind of needs the core feature set to be solved. The next you need to know is the competition. What other people are building in this. You need to kind of just make an Excel sheet with what the features they're providing, what deal breakers they have, what are the pricing models they are going with. Once you've done that, you need to analyze the market opportunity. All right, so I have this problem, I have these personas. How big is the market? Am I going to tap 2% of the market, 5% of the market? What is the revenue that I'm thinking I'm going to be able to build in the next 1 year? These things you need to answer even before building the MVP. Once you have all these 4 things answered, you need to identify the core feature set. This will happen once you've done all these, when you've defined the user problem and you've created personas. This you're going to do after feedback from users or conducting surveys or other things. So from what you talk to the users and after creating personas for that specific persona, what are the core features without which they won't even use the product? That's it. Those are the feature sets. Even the feature set, you'll have to distinguish it, define it into primary feature set and secondary. You can't just give a very bare minimum product to people for SMEs. They need a sort of a mature product right to start with. So you need to have a balance between the primary feature set and the secondary feature set. Both of them essentially fall in the core feature set. Once you have this core feature set ready, you build it out. And during building are the product lifecycle things that we spoke about. The initial phase is ideation, then you design it, then you wireframe it, you write tasks, briefs, and then you get it executed with the engineering team. You also, when you are, before starting building this MVP, you need to understand and define what the metrics are. How am I going to say that this MVP is going to be successful? What is that one metric? KRA is what we call it, and every company has it. It might take time to actually derive the right metric to track what this product does, because it's not a very straightforward metric like just conversion or engagement. It is a mix of 3-4 things together based on your user intent and user behavior that you actually define these metrics. And last but not the least, this is something very, very crucial and important, is to define the right agile methodology. The product manager is the one who has to get the team to execute these things in a time bound manner. It will only happen if you have a process defined. And trust me, agile methodologies work wonders if they are done rightly. Even in agile methodologies, what I have seen in the past in a few companies where they were used before, they were not really agile. They never really followed an actual sprint. Yes, they did the daily stand-ups for 5-10 minutes, but they never answered the 3 questions that you're supposed to answer. The stand-ups went on for 15 minutes. I think that's not going to work. You really need to define the methodology very correctly, as specific as you can, and then try to follow it. That is something that gives you a very quantitative tracking of how the project is happening. So this bit, you also need to be sort of a project manager, because now the concept of project managers is going away from all industries, and it's the product manager who's doing everything. So these are the things you need to kind of start off with in building an MVP. Now, once you've built the MVP, how do you release it to your customers? The way we or I have done it at Apple or at Nykaa and at Browserstack is we initially do an alpha release. We just release it to the internal company. If it's a big company, this alpha release also turns out to be very, very useful. You run dog fooding sessions where the entire company kind of tests this product. The purpose of alpha stage is to just make sure that the product works correctly. Basically, you're not making the actual users test it. You're just making your own company test it. They just have to like a QA test if everything is working fine, if you are able to take the right amount of load, and if the product is stable all the time. So your success metrics for alpha could be like, say your uptime is so much, all features need to work accurately, there should not be any stability issues or those. So that's your purpose of alpha. The next thing you do, so typically you run alpha depending on the size of the product from somewhere between 15 days to a month's time. Once you've done that, you run private beta. So in alpha also you'll get a lot of feedback and stability issues to fix. So you fix that and then you do a private beta release. This release is to an existing customers. These customers could be the customers whom you've spoken to do your surveys, to understand the various personas that are there, or to identify the core feature set. You can reach out to the same customers, because these customers are generally the ones who are very excited about, they are the ones who are actually feeling the pain and really need a product to try out. So they'll give a very honest try to your product and try out every feature that is. The goal of this should be that, is this product solving their real problem? Which means if they are using a product A right now, if they are using some sort of internal setup, are we able to replace that internal setup up to a correct extent? So whatever answers this is going to be your success metric for private beta. And once you have been successful in doing this, then you go and do a more public beta where you add on more servers or whatever needs to be done to kind of have more and more people use it. Now, the purpose of public beta is going to be slightly different. It's not just that is it solving their problem, because 100 other products are solving their problem. But do users love your product? Are you giving them something else in your product which they like completely like adore and want to keep using? That's something that also, thinking about virality in this early stage helps a lot. Like, I'll give you an example of Browserstack. Browserstack is a completely viral product. There is no marketing that's done for the entire product, and they have more than 35,000 enterprise customers who are using the product. For a B2B space in India, and having such a global impact is quite huge. So they've definitely, so the thing that they've done differently is answer this question of, do users love your product, right at the MVP stage? And you keep implementing and building on this, which I'll tell you in the further stages. Once you've also identified, all right, there could be different metrics. You can Google up what are the metrics to kind of track virality. The terminologies are there and there are multiple ways of doing it. So I'm not going to get into that right now. Once you've done your public beta, you do the final public release. At this point, you also introduce pricing, because at this point, you know what the real value proposition a user is getting. And then you track it. The success metrics for these are fairly the ones that you'll see: general conversion, retention, engagement, and all. You don't do it right as yet in MVP stage. You do it in the next stage. So this is how you should go about building an MVP, which is the first stage. This also helps in identifying, when a new product manager is aspiring to join a company, what are you more inclined towards? Are you more inclined towards building a product from scratch? Are you more inclined towards growing a company from X to Y, where you also need to have some business principles, where you need to be really strong at the business principles? Or are you interested in dealing with a matured company? They also have a different set of challenges, which I'll walk you through. This kind of helps you identify or eliminate the companies you want to work or you don't want to work with, because you'll know what stage the company is at or the product building is at. The next one is what happens in the growth phase. So now you have your MVP, you've released it, people are buying it, you're getting good conversions. Cool. What's next? The next things that you need to answer in a growth phase, generally what I mean by growth is not by going by from 1.5 conversion rate to 2 to 2.5. We mean growth as going very aggressively, from going from 1x to 5x or 1x to 10x. So your strategies really need to be different here. So, but the basic things that you need to identify in this is and solve in this is, you're going to solve stability problems here, you're going to solve scalability problems here, you're going to solve a little bit of product marketing. It'll get involved here. You need to know your customers, from what source they are getting acquired, what are their behaviors, how can you leverage one acquisition channel a lot. You need to build on the virality that your MVP has already proven. Here is the stage when you need to make sure that engagement, retention are taken care of. Retention, especially in cases of B2B products, because they are subscribing products. You keep getting money every month on month or year on year. So retention becomes very, very important. Even when you think of an entire product funnel. A product funnel, as everybody I'm sure would know, starts with acquisition and then it goes into the main sign up onboarding stage. Once the onboarding is done, then the actual conversion is the user using and converting, and then ultimately drops out. But good companies actually get these users back into the start of the channel and keep using it. So retention or churn is a metric which defines really good companies in terms of B2B space. In terms of an e-commerce or a B2C space, it's majorly the conversions that really impact, and the engagement and the virality activities that really, really help you. And once you have all these engagement, retention sorted out, you know your customer behaviors, you can run experiments over and identify growth opportunities and whatever the gaps are. If your retention rate is say X, and you know that if you calculated right that your retention has to reduce by so much for your growth to be so much, then you start running experiments for that particular measure. These are the things that you essentially do in the growth phase. The next phase is the maturity phase. Here, your product is kind of stable. You know, you have your experiments, growth experiments continuously happening. It's reached to a stage where you wanted it to be, but you want to build a more matured product out of it, or a more matured company at this point out of it. Things that you kind of deal with in this phase are more, you start thinking about partnerships, your product, what can it partner with, what are the affiliations it can do with. Product evolution essentially happens here. This is very interesting. This is what I have worked in at Apple. We started off building one matured product and we started dividing it into small products, because every product within itself was a giant. Every feature within itself that we built up till now, by running all these experiments, by trying to make sure people are getting more value out of it, essentially every small component also started turning out into be a much larger product. So this is something that happens at this stage. But you really need to, from a product manager point of view, you should have gone through the first two stages to even get an idea of how this product evolution. Here is where you need to have that vision that, okay, this is how the product is going to translate to. The impact analysis, also retention, engagement, keep continuing even in the maturity phase, they don't stop. And of course, at this point, you also start thinking of larger organizations in case of B2B that you want to kind of onboard, because they need a lot of different setups and a lot of different requirements. So you can kind of address them here to make them use your product more and more. So essentially, in the differences in the growth phase and in the maturity phase, a lot of business knowledge, a lot of product marketing, and a lot of product understanding. Like these three stages, for you to understand the product and its vision, to understand the business and its vision, gets very, very critical. All right, so now that we've seen what the product lifecycle looks like, what things are involved in it, what makes an excellent product manager? So for this, we actually ran a survey. When I was at Apple, we'd run a survey through product managers, because product manager is a very subjective field, is what everybody feels, but we kind of deny it's not so subjective. There are certain things that you really need to have for a product manager to do an excellent work. The three things that in the survey came out to be common is that a product manager, an excellent product manager, needs to articulate what a winning product looks like. So he needs to, in his mind, already visualize what the product is, what the vision of the product is going to be. The second most important thing is he needs to rally the team to build it. He has to convince the team that they need to build this, and we have to build this in a time-bound manner. And the third is that you have to keep on iterating on it until you get it right. Here, your passion really helps, because only if you're passionate, you're going to want to, or you have an OCD, which a lot of product managers actually do. You keep working to get it right. You keep running your experiments. You keep trying to find gaps and things to get it right. So I think the role never ends, whichever phase of product life cycle you are at. Now, the qualities that you need for being a product manager, from the three things that we just saw, what defines an excellent product manager, is the must-haves are going to be an outstanding intellectual ability. So you need to have the ability to process and synthesize information, because you're not going to be a master of technology. You're not going to be a master of UX, or you're not going to be a master of business. But you need to have the intellectual ability to process the information that's given to you constantly and to actually synthesize it in a right way. You need to understand that this is the most critical ability that you need, and this is where we've seen a lot of product managers failing, even if they have been exceptionally smart, or they know how to write code, or they are very good UX designers, or whatever the case be. If you're not good at this, you're not suited for being a product manager. If you're not good at this, you work to get these things right. The second most important is excellent communication, of course, because you have to rally the team to build it. You need to have a very strong communication. When you are talking, everybody needs to kind of listen to you and believe in what you're building. If your team believes in what you're building, and it's not just you, it makes it so easier for you to build out the product. The third is demonstrate leadership. This is quite straightforward. And the fourth is collaborative and effective within the company culture. Now, this makes a lot of impact, especially when you are in companies where the employee ratio is around 500,000 plus more. It's very essential that you are a part of the company culture, you believe in it, and you collaborate within this culture. If you do that, you're in good terms with a lot of people, and you can really get things done from the entire team. So these are the four qualities. Especially at Apple, we were very strict about these four qualities when we used to hire product managers there. The good to have is definitely the knack for knowing what users, customers want. Why is this good to have? Because if you are already good at the intellectual ability to process and synthesize information, you're going to also reach out to customers nevertheless at that point itself. The second thing that's good to have is strategic and analytical thinking. This really helps you in building the right product that you have been. The third is the technical background. How good are you in, have you had any sort of technical background? It could be engineering. It doesn't need to be computer science engineering, or it could be something in any sort of technical background helps here. And last but not the least is the entrepreneurial spirit. Yes, you need to believe that you're the CEO of the product, and that's how you're going to kind of want to keep going aggressive and building the product out. A product manager needs to be very aggressive, not by his actions or by not by saying or by communicating, but by the way his vision towards the product is, by the way he creates the product roadmaps and what he wants to achieve. And last but not the least, bonus is if you write code, it's a bonus. If you can create designs, do the, write good tasks, briefs, detailed documentation, these are bonuses. And these are bonuses especially in the large scale industries. In startup, you might have to be in a startup. If you're joining in as a product manager, it could be a quality that is essential, that is a must have, because you're not going to have different people to do different things. But in case of an enterprise, if you join a big company, these are good to have, because there are people who actually do this and who are good at it. So you don't need to be good at these things in a bigger organizations. But if you are in a startup, you really need to know the basics about this, and you have to be good at the basics about this. So these are generally the qualities that a lot of people look for in a product manager. And this, I have seen this trend, we've seen across Dropbox, across Twitter, across Apple, across Tesla, across Browserstack, and we try to follow the same even in Nykaa. So yeah, now we're up for questions. We can.
Yes. Thanks, Snehal. That was really insightful, and the kind of depth with which you explain the roles and responsibilities of a PM. So we have a couple of questions which have come up from the audience, and we'll take a set of questions that the audience had shared with us previously.
Okay.
So one of the first questions that comes to my mind and has come to a lot of people's minds as well is that how does product management vary across different setups, like at a startup versus the Googles, Amazon, and the Apple of the world? So how much of what are the roles and responsibilities of a PM in these different setups?
Right. So, like I said, I showed in the last slide about the skill sets that you need, the must to, you need to have, the good to have, and the bonuses. These also vary. So in a startup, a product manager is essentially the CEO. So he has to be good at everything. A product manager is really the one who's building out everything. You don't have great UX designers with you there. You don't have great product analysts with you who can help you do your data analytics or whatever. So you need to be a master of that. You need to collaborate well on that, and you need to be strong enough and passionate about the entire MVP stage that I gave out at that point. These are the qualities that you need to kind of have these are the responsibilities that you need to play when you are into a startup, because a startup is essentially in an MVP or a slightly growth phase. It's not more than that. It's not a matured company yet. So those are the things you need to do. The skill sets needed for them is what we showed in the first diagram itself, of what from the UX, business, and technology point of view you need in those. And for large enterprises, what you really need to know is these agile methodologies of working with teams. The company culture is another point that big organizations really stress on, because that ultimately drives a better product. And these companies are crazy about it. Like Apple is crazy about believing in the company culture. And if you so there's a test that Uber runs in the SF office when they go to receive their product manager for an interview at the airport. They send a taxi, and if the guy has not even said thank you to the person who's dropping him, he is rejected. He's not even taken into the next round. This is how serious companies are about people following the company culture. And so that aspect and that maturity is what's needed in the large enterprise. And when you're also working in a Google or Amazon, your data analytics has to be very strong, because you're not allowed to do the smallest of feature change unless and until you're able to convince the entire room that, these are the numbers, this is how the behavior is, this is the exact impact that's going to be, and this is how our actual metric is going to vary. So you really need to be very strong in analytics. In higher companies, you really need to start by being data driven. That's the first thing that you have to do. You also need to have a learning curve of learning, because the product is already at a stage where it's a little stable and it's evolving. So that learning curve is going to be coming there. But whereas at a startup, you are the one who's building and doing everything. So you know the entire history of it. You're not going to be so hellbound on data driven. Of course, you're going to want to track the major main metrics, but you're not going to have to be excellently data driven. But you do have to know the design and UX principles, the feedback systems very well at that point.
Right. So as you were speaking, there were a lot of areas where people had some sort of confusion. So how do the roles and responsibilities of a product manager vary from that of a project manager? So that is a question that we have from the audience at the moment.
Oh, okay. So a project manager is someone who just kind of has to do the process. He just has to make sure that everybody who's saying that they'll do these tasks have to complete it on time. That's all a project manager, and he has to work with all these teams to get that done. But he doesn't have a complete picture of what has to be done. A product manager is someone who's going to build it out. In the MVP, the initial questions that we saw, let me kind of go there, that will help. Yeah. So defining the user problem, creating distinct personas, studying the competition, analyzing market opportunity, all up till the defined metrics to track success. This is what a product manager has to do. All these things are not done by a project manager. A project manager essentially manages a project. Once you have the roadmap of the product out, that's the stage when you have a project to build. A product manager has to be the one who has to even identify what you have to build. Once you've identified, once you've relegated the tasks to whoever, then a project manager can help in to actually get everything executed on time. So that's essentially the core difference.
Right, right. And so basically, this is a question which is coming again. So what is the process that you follow to evaluate customer feedback before you turn it into a feature request?
All right. So the way we do it, and the way I've done it at Apple and at Browserstack is that we do not really ask very, very specific questions, because over the period, what we've identified is if you ask questions in terms of yes and no, you really don't understand the user behavior. So we do customer study calls with these users, asking them a little more generic questions. So they are open to giving us their behavioral knowledge also. And essentially what we'll do is that there are these 40 people. If I've done a customer study of, say, from 40 people, and all out of 40, 80% people need this particular feature. What we'll do is we'll see how this feature, what is the competition doing about this feature. We'll try to do market research or other documents or whatever's available online to see what goes into actually what is the impact that this feature is going to provide. We definitely do that calculation first before even building it, and then we do the technical feasibility, how technologically feasible this feature is going to be to build it. So essentially the three things that we do is we summarize all the customer feedback, and then we have metrics in our systems to identify if this feature is going, what is the impact this feature is going to make. If that impact level is between, say, A to B, we also have ranges of impact levels that we pick up in MVP stage versus in growth stage. So if it falls within that, then we kind of see the technology feasibility. If the technology feasibility is like it's going to take 6 months to build it, we might not pick that up. We might pick a very similar feature which is within the similar range, and if it has a less technology feasibility to it to start with.
Right. So a question that comes to mind is that, I mean, since you worked across different domains and different industries, so how important is domain knowledge for a product manager working in a company?
Domain knowledge, I would say, would fall into good to have. It's not a must have, it's a good to have feature. But if you do not have the domain knowledge, then you really need to have the ability to quickly learn and adapt. That learning curve for you is going to be very steep, and no company is going to wait for you for like 3 months, 6 months for you to even understand that domain space at a very basic level that a product manager needs to be. So you either need to have a great learning curve, ability to catch up things very quickly, the intellectual ability to synthesize information quickly, or domain knowledge helps.
Right, right. And so when you were speaking about the different setups as well, like a startup versus a large company. So I mean, in terms of roles, how does the role of a CPO versus a CTO work in a company, in a small company, in a small setup?
In a small setup, a CPO is essentially the guy who builds a product vision. Let me take a very small example. Everybody knows that Tesla and a lot of companies are trying to build self-driving cars. So a CTO essentially here would be involved in what are the technical challenges users are going to be there to build something like this. While as a CPO is going to be, okay, what is the impact this self-driving is going to make, and he needs to have that vision. All right, so if self-driving car comes in, that means that nobody else is going to ever have to drive. That means a car shape can be changed into maybe a conference room with 6 seats around it, where you can even hold conferences or things like you can there's not going to be need of any parking garages for apartments or some such thing. These all things are going to be thought of by the CPO, while as the CTO is going to be involved in, okay, to do these things, how am I going to get, what do I need to innovate in technology to get these things right? And this
Okay.
also holds true even for an organization like Apple.
Right. Got it. So another question is that, I mean, in terms of a product manager's daily activities, is there a need for a product manager to involve themselves in all the aspects that make up the product, or is it better to is better supported by a skilled team through like just delegation of tasks to them?
All right. Here, I would say that if you are in a startup, then you should be involved in each and everything, because the team is as new as you are and you're trying to all build a new product together. The more information that a product manager has while building a MVP, the better, because he gets a very clear vision of where the product, he tries to understand subconsciously what the product path has to be. Plus, you're not going to have all the skilled workers in a startup per se. But if you're working in something like Apple, then I would say yes, after a point, there's like a very little overlap that you have to do with each of these teams, like design team or engineering team, or maybe a product analyst or a data analyst. You just need to kind of say, okay, these are the things I need from these teams to kind of get my product roadmap and to get my product idea for yourself. And then you can let them run, because they have very well defined processes in there already.
Okay, got it. So, given in the context of what you were speaking, in terms of a large company versus small company, we have one interesting question which has come in, which is, what are the challenges you faced uh, with Agile, especially at a large company when you are handling scale?
Okay, so at a large company, in fact, we did not face a lot of agile challenges, because as the word agile terminology says, that you always have to break teams down into small sets. So we had a rule that no team would be bigger than 7 people in it. So, but in large companies, one organization has more than 100 people. A product in itself has more than 100 people working. But what differentiates is that you have multiple components into these products. So we did that distinguishing of the multiple components. And once we had these multiple components, we even subdivided these components into smaller pieces such that they could run independently. And we created smaller teams to kind of have it. And all these smaller teams kind of ran parallelly, and the project manager was the one who would try to kind of align everything together ultimately with the product manager, to make sure that a whole feature gets released at a stage, because you have a lot of dependencies with other teams. So those challenges come in once you have these agile methodology. But if you follow the rule that your team size cannot be more than 7 to 10 people, I think it still is workable.
Sure, got it. All right. And so basically, in terms of sort of interacting with the user, how often do you think product team should interact with the user to sort of understand different challenges that the users are facing while using your product?
Oh, I would say every week. I do 2 to 3 customer calls every week. Every week, at whatever phase I've been. I've done that at Apple. At Apple, we used to go one step ahead. We used to actually go to Apple stores to shadow our geniuses who are in the store, to see what they are doing with the product that we've given them in hand all day. And we used to do this every month. Every product person had to do this every month.
Right. And so basically, user research in a B2B setup would be different from a B2C setup, right? Where B2C, it's easier for you to interact with your users and understand their pain points.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In B2C, surveys work more better than in B2B.
Okay. All right. And so another question which has come in, so this is again from someone who wants to understand, who's come from a non-tech background. What steps would you sort of highlight for them to sort of work on building their tech understanding and develop and interact with the tech teams in a better manner?
Okay. The one essential thing I'll tell them is to know, this is one question that we ask everyone. When you type in a regular URL into your browser bar, what actually happens in the backend? If they understand that part, they'll at least know how the internet is working. Once you know how the internet, because all the products that are based out right now are off internet. Once you know that, I would say, if you are trying to build an app, or if you're trying to build a product which is an app, or which is a dev tool or whatever, I would tell them, try to kind of build an app by yourself. It could be just a sample app. You don't have the technology background, you don't need to. There's so much help online to have you code one single app or code one single piece of a web service and to run it by yourself, but you should try to do it yourself.
Right. That makes best sense because there's so many resources available online. I mean, it also is a good opportunity for everybody right now to sort of gain their understandings to those different research objectives, right?
Yeah.
Common question, given your experience, is that what is the tech ecosystem in India? How does it compare to that of the Silicon Valley or the US currently?
The tech ecosystem is pretty good. I would say we have some very strong engineers and really some strong innovations in technology happening, especially in terms of coding. But I would say in product management, we still see a lot of people who are essentially doing more of project management plus engineering and calling themselves product management. So product management still needs to evolve in India. The product managers that I deal with here are very different from what we deal with there. So the slides that I've shared for the qualities that you need in a product manager, a lot of them would put that you need to have technology background right into the must have, but that's not critical. The critical aspect is that you need to have the intellectual ability to synthesize information. So these differences we still see. In terms of technology, it's great because a lot of like Apple had quite a bit of their technology team out of India. Google has teams, technology teams working out of India. Facebook has, but none of them have their product teams who are building their actual product out of India.
Right, right. So, I mean, since you've worked with such diverse teams in different industries, so what is basically, you must have worked with younger PMs or aspiring PMs. So, what are the common mistakes that you see younger PMs or aspiring PMs sort of make in their early stages of the career?
That's a tough one because every PM comes with a very different behavior and a different background.
Right.
Let me see. For aspiring PMs, I think one common mistake they do is that they directly jump into solutions, you know. For them, they want to build something out and see it executed. That's not true. Out of your 100%, you should spend 50% time in defining the user problem. Trust me, it's a very important terminology to define the user problem. Somebody would argue that, you know what, if I'm building a cross-browser testing tool, I just want my user to do browser testing. That's my user problem. That's not really how you derive to the user problem. Understanding what the user problem really is takes a lot of customer studies, understanding user behaviors. So I would say people don't spend enough time in understanding the problem. They want to directly jump into solutions. So that's one rookie mistake I see a lot of aspiring PMs make, but then they evolve.
Right, right. And another question we have is how far into the future do you sort of work in to make your product roadmap, and how often do you sort of work and make tweaks to the roadmap that you've made?
So we make product roadmaps for an entire year. And every quarter, this product roadmap gets reviewed. It was same at Apple and it's same at Browserstack that we follow. And every quarter, based on what feedback you receive from user, because what happens is there's product that's running independently. There's also the sales team and the marketing team that run independently. So all of them have very different targets towards the end of the year, though the main target can be same. So quarterly, we all meet to see, you know what, this is what I need from a product standpoint. This is what we've thought of to convert. That gets tweaked a bit based on the user feedback that you get. Because user feedback will always make you tweak things. It's not going to be some major thing that, you know what, this feature was a complete failure, you need to build something else. But you need to maybe improve a certain feature or add a additional utility to that feature for a user to identify, sort of a things. And then if you see that, you know, if you were very confident that in the quarter one, you were looking at conversion, but the conversion was costing you retention, then in quarter two, instead of conversion being your main thing, you'll also say, you know what, hey, I'm going to look at conversion, but my retention is really, really dropping, which is concerning. So I'm going to tweak my roadmap a little bit for this quarter to kind of also address retention.
Right, right. So essentially 1 year is what is the product
Yes.
roadmap generally built for, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, yeah. Also, so does a product manager directly get involved with pricing strategies of a product, and at what stage do they actually decide on how they would price their product to launch it into the market?
Oh yes, product manager is the first person who sits with the CEO to kind of define. He's the best person who knows the product. So he knows what value it is also giving to the customers. So I had done the entire pricing thing with Browserstack in the growth phase. So that was slightly different. A product manager gets involved in pricing at 3 stages. One is at MVP when he's giving out the very first cut of pricing. At this stage, you basically just try to identify that one metric. Okay, what is that one, not even metric, what's that one value based on which you define usage of how they are using. So for Browserstack, it could be in terms of the time that they are taking to test, or it could be the devices, the different devices they are taking. So you have to pick which is the one that's critical for you, which is the one that's critical for the users. Is it the multiple devices that's critical, or is it the time that they take? So if it's the devices, then you do sort of a very basic pricing around the devices for the different personas. This is what you do at the MVP level. But at the growth level, so we did Browserstack pricing at the growth level. Here you kind of revisit your pricing due to different problems. You see that people are occasionally churning off, like because they have a need only for like out of 6 months, they only use it for 2 months. So they churn off and then they repurchase it. The different team structures that you have, the different personas that you have, like say in an enterprise, there need to be 25 people who need to test on 50 plus devices. You need to give them the ability for all of them to run the test parallelly, because they're not going to wait for the other one. But in a startup, what they are concerned with is multiple devices, but only one person is going to test. So you need to address these problems. You need to address the personas that you've built and that you are seeing actually being used by the product. You need to define pricing for them and revisit it. And revisiting pricing happens every day. So in Salesforce and Apple and Google, all of them have a dedicated pricing team. There's one person who keeps looking at the pricing page of their product every day and makes some or the other tweaks to it every now and then.
Right, right. Makes sense, yes. And so a common question again we have on the chat is that so while launching a product, what are the different strategies that you go ahead with while launching your product in the market? And is offline events a part of your product launch? And does a product manager essentially go out to all these events in case of a launch?
So the strategy for product launch will really vary based on what domain space you are in. So
Right.
for Nykaa, and I've been in both Nykaa and in Browserstack, so I can tell you how it varied. In Nykaa, what we did is when we build out our apps, what we did is that we had a actual offline event, which I'm not sure a lot of you might also know, Nykaa Femina Awards, where a lot of people from the beauty space came in to hype and talk about the brand Nykaa. For us, it was very essential that we first build the brand Nykaa out. And then we did a lot of sessions where a lot of them spoke about what the app provides and what it does not. This works for Nykaa because it's a B2C space, and beauty is very glamorous. You know, beauty and glamour are always tied together. And from this event, we saw a huge response of people downloading apps. Of course, it doesn't mean that this is the only thing you need, because you're not going to have, this is not a scalable way. You can't keep doing offline events everywhere. But this one thing gives a little bit of media attention, and the brand building happens. So the core purpose of doing this event was more of brand building than of releasing the product. While as in Browserstack, say we developed a product called app testing, we don't do anything. Browserstack doesn't even do Google advertisements. What we do is we post it on Twitter, or we post it on Hacker News, any developer community. Developers are introvert people who go to these developer communities. We first, and in case of developers, they are very, very I think impatient, because if they're coding something and if you provide them a tool and the tool doesn't work the first time, they're never going to use a tool again, ever. So, you know, you need to do these alpha, private beta, public beta phases very carefully with them. That's the reason we do these phases, to understand. And developers are never even straightforward of what they want. They'll talk very little. They'll tell you very little. You have to derive a lot of information from it about their organization and other things. So here you would just go to say Twitter, Hacker News, or such things, what we've seen is that events here have never helped. If we've gone to like coding event and said Browserstack is a new product, we've not really seen any affiliations, any traffic coming in from there. So that doesn't work, because developers always Google stuff, and they are the people who like to do things by themselves. You know, they want to try things by themselves. They want to discover things by themselves.
Right, right. So we take the last question now, and a question that everybody wants an answer to is that what is a typical day at office for you like?
So for me, a typical day is the very first thing that I go and do is I see if there are any customers that I have to make calls to. I'll tell you why. Right now, I am building this MVP. So a typical day for me varies depending on what phase I am at also. If I am in the growth phase, then I'll be looking at numbers the very first thing in the morning. But in MVP, I don't have any numbers to look at. What I look at is, are there any customer calls that I have to make? The second thing I look at is, have I received any feedback for the product that our internal private beta people are using? The third is the stand-up. We conduct our daily stand-ups at the start of the day. We don't start it so early, because what we've observed that if we started at 10 a.m. or so, people are not prepared for their stand-ups. They've not really thought through what they finished yesterday, are there any dependencies they have or not. So we try to do it somewhere around 11:30. We try to keep it very short. Everybody in the team says what their challenges are, or if they need any dependencies from them. And then depending on if I'm working in a sprint, if we are in the sprint phase where I'm building out a feature, I'll either set up meetings with the engineering team to brainstorm on technology decisions. The plus point that I have at Browserstack here is that my teammates are my actual users. They are the developers are going to use my product, and I already have users on my table. So I constantly try to brainstorm all ideas with them and understand their user behavior also. So we have at least one of these brainstorming sessions every day. The brainstorming session is not very random. There's a very specific purpose to that and what the outcome of that meeting should be. So only once you have the outcome of that meeting, I actually only enter meetings which have outcomes already written in the meeting invite. Otherwise, a lot of meetings are very pointless. And ultimately, towards the end of the day, as a user also, I try to run an app on whatever we are building. I try to do those steps as a user myself, because I've had that previous experience. This is what an ideal day for me looks like. And plus, if there are any other meetings with support team or whatever else.
Right, right. All right, Snehal, that was a great session. It was wonderful to get your insights on product management and your experience over the past couple of years. So thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in to this session with Snehal. I would also like you to sort of understand the different series of webinars and offline events that we have as a part of the Learning Week here at UpGrad. And you guys should definitely log in to all of these sessions. And there's a lot of content available that UpGrad is currently put up on their website. You can tune in and understand the different kind of modules we have in the different programs. Once again, thank you guys for coming in. All right, yeah, goodbye.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, Snehal. Thanks so much.
Yeah, bye.